What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another new bike day. So today Revel just relaunched the Rascal and they actually made a few tweaks to the frame. Now not too much has been done to the actual Geo, but they were able to shave about half a pound from the frame weight. So this is a new Rascal SL carbon frame. They also have a few additional updates like mounts for a tool storage on the top tube, as well as improved cable routing. Now this has actually been my first time on a Revel. I've had this Rascal for about a month and this is actually the missing puzzle piece to that big project I keep teasing here on this channel. So stay tuned for that. Now that this bike is out, we'll be able to compare the Revel Rascal to a few other similar bikes in this travel category, but today's video we're gonna be talking about the Rascal SL. And it's always interesting getting a bike that you've never ridden any other bike from the lineup because you have no idea how the bike is going to ride out on the trails. You're not familiar with the suspension design. I was kind of curious, was I going to like it? Was I not going to like it? How is it going to stack up against other suspension designs that I like? And I have been completely blown away by the suspension design on this thing, as well as how this bike rides. So what is the Revel Rascal? So this is going to be their mid-travel bike. So you have 140 millimeters of travel up front and you have 130 millimeters of travel in the rear. Now this build isn't a stock build kit. There was actually some parts that were embargoed that we couldn't show ahead of time. Me personally, I'm about 6'2". This is a size extra large test bike. For suspension, we actually have a RockShox Lyric Ultimate up front, and in the rear, we actually have a Super Deluxe rear shock. For the drivetrain, we have a SRAM Exo transmission drivetrain. We have a bike yoke dropper post on here, and I actually put an Ergon SM Enduro saddle on there as well. Now, there is no internal frame storage on this thing. Some people will absolutely love that. Some people won't love that. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about internal frame storage. I feel like it's still a debated thing. I feel like the jury is not out yet. Up front, we have a full Trail One cockpit, which is interesting to see on a bike. You have their carbon handlebars, their stem, as well as their grips. For brakes, we actually have SRAM Code Ultimate brakes, so you have carbon levers on here. For wheels, we have Crank Brothers alloy wheels with Industry 9 hubs, and we have Continental tires. We have a Crip Total on the rear, and then a Zin Total. I always forget how to pronounce it. Zinodal tire in the rear. I don't know. The names are always confusing, but we'll talk more about what I think about this tires later on. Now the Revel Rascal has a 65.5 degree head angle. We have about a 436 rear chainstay. And overall, we have a very fun, rippable geometry on this bike. And I've really enjoyed my time over the last few weeks. And once again, I'm super excited to compare this bike to a few other bikes in this travel category. But for now, let's take you out on the trails out here in Tucson, Arizona and show you guys how this thing rides. Feels so good to be back in Tucson, Arizona. We're at the 50-year trail system. I really have been loving testing bikes out here because I feel like it's perfect for these little shorter travel rigs. There's so much up, down, all around. You know, this one is pretty fun for me too, because there's very few brands out there of bikes that I haven't ridden. Revel was one of them. After spending a lot of time on this bike, I'm kind of bummed it's been like that because this thing is a blast. I'm tech climbing right here, watch. Just straight up it. I don't know what it is about this CBF. I actually think this might be one of my favorite suspension designs at this point. It's so efficient uphill, but makes no sense on the downhills because plenty of traction. Dare I say, maybe even a little bit better version of DW Link? I'm not sure yet, you guys will have to stay tuned. The other thing I appreciate about the Rascal is just how playful it feels. Definitely one of those bikes that wants to be kind of whipped around coming through here. Definitely one of the more, let's see if we can get up here. Nice. One of the more playful short travel 29er options. All right, a little bit more tech climbing right here. Just kind of, man, traction feels somewhat unlimited. I mean, these Continental Crip Totals definitely help me. I feel like these are definitely sticky tires. Do I prefer the Crip Totals? Definitely not. We'll talk about that in the buyer's guide. But in terms of traction from the bike, you could tell this thing so planted yet efficient, which is the weirdest combo. All right, we have some slow speed slab. No issues for the Rascal, both in and out of the saddle, very efficient. We're gonna take this little inside line and just kind of awkwardness here. Once again, no issues for the Rascal. It's just such a controlled bike, yet so capable through that chunk. Now this is where the fun stuff starts. On the Rascal through here, kind of just up over, a little blind in certain sections, no issues for the Rascal. Such a controlled bike. Like I said, even though it's playful most of the time, you can tell there's still a ton of control. Like this little slab right here, coming through, and so easy to make that corner off of this. We're actually gonna go high line here, up and over. Oh my God, so good. We're gonna get a little on the chunkier bit. I'm gonna take this little line inside. Oh yes, that Lyric feeling magic up front. And then we're gonna kind of go over this crack Now we're gonna try and not end up in that cactus, but God, what a freaking awesome bike, Revel. Think we go up here, but we got so much control. We got plenty of time to make that decision. Ooh, some speed. Oh yes, yes. Oh, such a good bike at generating speed. And then we have a kind of a big slab over here. Let me see if I can remember where the line is. I think it's down here. No issues for the 130 millimeter Rascal. Soul is so interesting to see how companies do the combination of capable yet playful. But at the end of the day, this travel category, it's intended to be more on the playful side. But I mean, trails have gotten so rad nowadays, and so has suspension, that you kind of need both. And man, this thing is pretty rad. I think a lot of that's that reach, shorter reach, mid-size stays, very awesome suspension design. And I think you get a ripper of a bike with the Revel Rascal. Whew. If you guys enjoyed that quick lap on this thing, got a couple of more corners before we get out of here, but let's head back and give you guys my first impressions of the Revel Rascal SL. Woo! Oh my God, we're gonna, that's so fun. The first thing we're gonna talk about is climbing. And I feel like a lot of this review is gonna kind of circle back to that CBF suspension design. I feel like the Revel Rascal is one of the better pedaling bikes out on the market right now. It really is magic how that CBF suspension design just gives a very good acceleration feel both in and out of the saddle. I felt like the bike was very efficient, and it was pretty interesting because later on the downhills, the bike would feel super active and I would feel like the bike is tracking and planted to the ground. However, when it came time for those climbs and those pedal sections, the bike almost felt like it was locked out at time. And once again, I'm someone who I like to get out of the saddle, put that power down, and I was constantly impressed by how tight and efficient the suspension design felt on climbs. Another thing I really appreciated on the climbs was that shorter reach. And we're gonna talk about that shorter reach on this bike a lot because I feel like it is a big part of its personality. I felt like the front end was very maneuverable, and especially on tight switchback style climbs, if there's any tech in there, anytime that you want to kind of put that front end exactly where you need to, I felt like the front end was very maneuverable for an XL. Did have to summarize this bike in terms of climbing, it would be that CBF suspension design. It's just this weird magical element to where it felt like there was a ton of traction at slower speeds, but then it tightens up and gives you that acceleration you would want when you get out of the saddle. And I was very impressed by how the Revel Rascal did it when it came time for climbing as well as pedaling. Let's move on to everyone's favorite part, the downhill. And that's where this thing really did put a smile on my face, circling back to that CBF suspension design. Now, when I first felt how efficient this thing felt uphill and how I felt like it tightened up on climbs, I was kind of concerned on how this thing would feel on the descent. How would that initial stroke be? I would say this probably has felt like it has one of the softest initial strokes on the downhill. Constantly, I was blown away by the traction, especially in that initial stroke. And the bike definitely blew me away in terms of traction, especially out here in Tucson where the dirt is so dry and loose. You could definitely feel like the bike has a little bit of added amount of traction in that initial stroke in comparison to some other bikes in this travel category. The rest of the travel is very controlled, but at the same time too, it still has a poppy element deep into its stroke. When you were pushing in and out of corners and you wanted this thing to kind of have that pop out of a corner, it still has that playful feel to it. And I was constantly impressed by how this thing did in and out of corners. I feel like that shorter reach keeps that front end very maneuverable, and I was able to play around with the front end of this bike, kind of get that front wheel in the air, up and over things. Head angles, not too slack, not too steep, kind of perfect number there, and that shorter reach just keeps the front end very maneuverable. The other thing is that rear chainstay being somewhat on the shorter side, but also not too short, so you still got that maneuverability from the rear end of the bike. It was fun slashing corners, but at the same time too, you had that high speed stability, because I feel like if they went too much shorter than that on the rear end, especially going a little bit shorter on the reach, you would lose a little bit of that high speed stability. So I do feel like it's a good compromise slash balance in terms of that. Now, what are some things that I didn't necessarily love about the Revel Rascal? Now, the first thing that comes to mind is probably going to be the reach. I feel like this is going to be one of those things that you're either going to love or you're going to not love. I feel like some riders out there might want a little bit more reach, a little bit more stability coming through the reach, because on much more high-speed straight sections, bikes with a little bit of a longer reach definitely feel like they have a little bit more stability there. So if you're looking for the most high-speed, stable-friendly bike, there might be some other options that might be a little bit more up your alley. Another thing would be no internal frame storage. Now, this is one of those things where we keep going back and forth. I've actually been riding with a pack recently, and I actually really like the pack over internal frame storage, so that's not something that's going to be a deal breaker for me. However, if you're a rider out there and you're looking for internal frame storage, that might be something that you might not necessarily like there. And other than that, there's not too much that I don't love about the Revel Rascal. Once again, this bike definitely blew me away, and I feel like it would always circle back to that CBF suspension design. This bike has that true magical suspension element to it out on the trails, and it really does make me wonder, what do I like more? Do I like CBF? Do I like DW Link? I do think that Revel was able to do an amazing job blending both worlds. It has a very capable feel to it in the chunk and when things get gnarly, but at the same time too, it has a very playful feel to it out on the trails. And I would actually say this is probably one of the more playful bikes in this travel category. How does this bike stack up to some other bikes with similar travels? You guys will have to stay tuned very soon to a big project that we're working on, so be sure to subscribe to not miss out on that. If you guys have any questions about the Revel Rascal, I'm gonna go ahead and link this bike in the description of this video. I do really like how they were able to get this thing a little lighter by shaving half a pound to that frame weight, and overall I'm very impressed by this bike, so happy to answer any of your guys' questions in the comment section. Be sure to subscribe to not miss out on any future content, and until next time you guys, ride awesome. You.